installment of our sort of exploration of the Gerush Sfarad, of the generation after the expulsion of the Jews from Spain. Give me 1 second. Just need to clear my throat. I'm just going. Okay. Hopefully that's better. So we are looking at we've been looking at this generation of the expulsion of the Jews from Spain, which is really a remarkable generation and perhaps a testimony to the fact that tremendous tragedy also inspires tremendous achievement, creativity. And so last week we looked at Gilgul Neshamot. We looked at the sort of this idea of the resurrection of or the reincarnation of souls, and we saw that that itself was a sort of a formulation of redemption. That in fact your soul is part of this redemption, this partnership with God. It was linked to the idea of repair, of the tragedy of the expulsion from Spain. And this week we're going to look at an entirely different dimension of the same thing. This week we are looking at a very legalist, a very halachic approach to the same idea. It is going to be very much inspired by redemption. It's going to be very much a project of repair, but it is going to be entirely halachic. And it's not going to feel mystical at all, at least on the outside. But we're going to see that on the inside, it is extremely mystical and it is extremely redemption oriented. And so we need to remember that how traumatic the expulsion from Spain was. And we're going to see this very shortly, just in a couple of brief biographies that I'm going to do at the outset. But there was an equal and opposite reaction of restoration, a return, if you will, to a certain kind of Jewish power, perhaps a kind of control, that the being pushed to the brink, at being at the whim of monarchs to sort of tumble through the Mediterranean, as you will see, was something that perhaps inspired a need to drive order, control, and repair. And so we're going to see that the legalists are going to use the tool that they know the best, which is, of course, the law. So let's start with the first of our figures, Rabbi Yaakov Beirav. I could not find any actual pictures of Rabbi Yaakov Beirav. In this generation of Tzfat, in the mid-16th century, Rabbi Yaakov Beirav was probably the leading figure of the city. Maybe second only to the Ari, but remember the Ari was a very young man and he died very young. And Rabbi Yaakov Beirav had a yeshiva, and that yeshiva lasted for many years, and it had many students, and it had a real staying power in the city. We do have some interesting evidence about Rabbi Yaakov Beirav and his life. We'll see sort of when I say that it's interesting for us to see how these individuals sort of tumble across the Mediterranean. I don't mean that actually figuratively. That's literally what happens. We'll see that almost all of the figures here have their origin in either Toledo or in Castile. And so Rabbi Yaakov Beirav begins his life in Toledo. I'm just going to put in mute all, and if you want to speak, please unmute yourself, ask a question. Don't be shy about that. So again, Rabbi Yaakov Beirav, he begins his life in Toledo, and at 18, he's a very young man, brilliant person. He's born in 1474, 18 years before the expulsion from Spain, and he becomes, at the age of 18, the chief rabbi of Fez, Morocco, which speaks to his brilliance. And in 1493, and then shortly thereafter, he moves into Algeria, into Tlemcen, and in 1510 the Spanish attack Maghreb, and he moves then to Cairo. And in 1516 he moves to Jerusalem, and this is probably because the Ottomans in that year take over the land of Israel, and the Ottomans have, generally speaking, been very good to the Jews. the Jews know the rules and they're not terribly abused under the Ottomans. And overall, under the Ottoman Empire, Jews do reasonably well. And then 3 years later, he moves to Tzvat. But you can see that it is the expulsion from Spain. It is various other kinds of turmoils that bring him to Tzvat. And in Tzvat, he sets up a yeshiva and he attracts excellent students. He seems to be very good at a couple of different things. One of which is being attracting students. The other one seems to be in funding the yeshiva, because Rabbi Yaakov Beirav, we have evidence of a particular rabbi who left the city of Tzvat, and after he leaves the city of Tzvat, he writes that, my apartment or some piece of property that he has, the rent or whatever fruits there are of an income from that should go all to the yeshiva of Rabbi Yaakov Beirav. He doesn't split it at all. So we know that he is able to raise money and he is able to gather a growing group of scholars. And the list of scholars is quite large. I'm not going to belabor you with names right now because I find that it's difficult for people to remember them, and it's also a little bit difficult to assimilate so many new names all at once. But I will tell you that in the future, in the second installment of this particular mini part of our series, we're going to be talking about Rabbi Yaakov Beirav's reinstitution of the Sanhedrin and reinstitution of Smicha. And you can only do that if you are very, 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 very well respected and a tremendous Talmid Chacham and have lots of students. Now that's number one. It should also be said that part of what made Rabbi Yaakov Beirav very successful is that his yeshiva was built on the same concepts that he would learn from his teacher Rabbi Chaim Abuav in Castile, and he maintained a very traditional kind of yeshiva, but also there was a sense of openness that all of the students were able to engage in discussion, try to resolve a problem in Rambam, and he clearly gave his students the possibility to be full partners and participants in the conversation, even if he was, at the end of the day, the leader, the Rosh Yeshiva, the final word. This is, by the way, from a letter that he sends where he says, Toda la'el miyom hagerush v'ashmad, from the day of the expulsion and the destruction. La'olam mora harot b'Yisrael v'rab l'chameshet alfim batim Yehudim b'medinat Fez. I was the rabbi of 5,000 families in Fez. K'mefursam b'chol ha'olam v'ayiti az ben yud chet shanim. I was only 18 years old then. Right? And he says, V'adayin lo hayiti b'chatimat zakan. I didn't even have a full beard. Right? And there were many great chachamim. So this is an important figure. But really, la'orach hadorot, for the many generations, the person that really is going to be the center of our discussion today, and the center, really, he is the pillar of all halachic discussion to this day. The master and codifier, Rabbi Yosef Karo. So Rabbi Yosef Karo is born also in Toledo, Spain. We don't know the exact day of his birth. People didn't really record that in those days. We know the day of death. The day of birth is less important. We didn't know he was going to be this important. So he starts off in Toledo, Spain, and the family moves to Portugal probably before the expulsion of the Jews from Spain. And they sort of go from the frying pan to the fire, because in Spain they expelled their Jews. In Portugal they forcibly converted them. And it seems that Rabbi Yosef Karo and his family left their home quite early, and they end up in going to Istanbul. And from Istanbul, they go to Adrianople, and from Adrianople, they go to now I'm forgetting where they went to. Then they went to Thessaloniki. Yes, they go to Thessaloniki, and in the course of this, at the age of 7, Rabbi Yosef Karo loses his father. Maybe at the age of 6 or 7, and he is adopted by his uncle, Rabbi Yitzchak Karo, who teaches him and becomes sort of this guiding light in his in his life. If you're wondering why there's one arrow which is blue, it's just so that you would be able to see all of this. In Thessaloniki, Rabbi Yosef Karo is going to meet someone very important, someone we need to keep our eye on here, and that is Rabbi Shlomo Molcho. He also meets Rabbi Shlomo Alkabetz. Rabbi Shlomo Alkabetz becomes his brother-in-law and is also the author of Lecha Dodi. But Shlomo Molcho is going to be even more important in his life than any of them, and we're going to see why. And then ultimately, he will come to Tzfat. Okay. Now, Rabbi Yosef Karo is famous because he wrote the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch. But he probably would tell you that that was the least important of the books that he ever put on paper. The Shulchan Aruch is really like, imagine you go to medical school and you have textbooks and you learn about circulation, you learn about pathology, and you learn about the nervous system, right? And you have these big textbooks and all of that. And then there's like this one little quick diagnostic guide that sort of summarizes all the points. That's what the Shulchan Aruch is. But we'll see that the great life work of Rabbi Yosef Karo is going to be a book which is called the Beit Yosef, which we'll get to in due course. Before we get there, I want to talk to you about a book that almost no one knows about in terms of Rabbi Yosef Karo, or at least in the popular world, they don't know about it. In the scholarly world, they know about it quite a bit, and it's a fascinating book for those who are themselves scholars. And it is called the Magid Mesharim. And the Magid Mesharim it's a spiritual diary, and it is a book, a sort of an autobiography, but it is a book about a Magid. This Magid is sort of, well, if you give me a few minutes, I'll describe what the Magid is, but let's, for the moment, as a placeholder term, we'll just call it an angel. It's an angel of sorts that speaks to Rabbi Yosef Karo. And he says the Magid, the personality of the Magid is the Mishnah. And the Mishnah perhaps identifying as the Shechina, as the presence of God. These are just some two quotes. V'hineni ha-mishnah ha'eim, ha-miyaseret et ha'adam. I am the Mishnah who challenges a man. Bati ledaber alechem. I came to speak to you. And he says, Ushchinta mimalala imach. I am the Shechina, I'm God's presence who speaks with you. And we'll find out from his the biographer, modern biography of Rabbi Yosef Karo is written by Rabbi Judah Tzvi Werblowski. And in his book, he has actually an article that I was able to find where he talks about the character of the Magid, and he sort of says the Magid is his guilty conscience. And we'll see in some of the quotes that are about to come exactly how that transpires. I actually want to, though, before I get that, let's get to Shlomo Molcho. If you remember, several weeks ago, and when I say several, I mean maybe like 10 weeks ago, we did our very first episode was on Shlomo Molcho. Shlomo Molcho was this individual who was himself a brilliant scholar. He was a justice on the Court of Appeals in Portugal. And Shlomo Molcho then meets this character whose name is David Haruveni, who says he's got this army of the 10 tribes, and he's looking for someone to arm provide weapons, guns, ammunition to his army of the 10 tribes, so that he can displace the Ottomans from the Holy Land and return it to the Christians. And Shlomo Molcho ultimately he meets Rabbi Yosef Karo, or we believe he meets Rabbi Yosef Karo in the yeshiva in Thessaloniki, or maybe that just Joseph Karo knows people who met Rabbi Shlomo Molcho, but he is obsessed with him. And for his entire life, Rabbi Yosef Karo believes that he will die a martyr's death, just like Shlomo Molcho. He just is not given that opportunity. Shlomo Molcho actually dies because he goes to the Holy Roman Emperor and asks him to arm, this legions of lost tribes in waiting. And that is a particularly bad idea. But Shlomo Molcho's also had a Magid, an angel who spoke to him and gave instruction. And the angel of Shlomo Molcho then transfers to Rabbi Yosef Karo. So, okay, this is the spiritual diary of Rabbi Yosef Karo. This is a little bit of a long piece, but I think it's going to help you understand what the voice that is in his head. Or Yom Shabbat. It was the night of Yom Shabbat. Achalti me'at mizi'ir. Right? I ate the smallest amount. V'chein asiti b'shtiatan, and I drank a little bit. V'shaniti, and I started to repeat my Mishnayot at the beginning of the night. And I started to sleep until the break of day. And I woke up and the sun was shining on the ground. V'nitztarti me'od. I was so pained. Ba'amri eich lo kamti ba'od halayla kadei she'yavo alai hadibur keminhag. How did I not get up in the middle of the night so that the Magid would speak to me? I started to read the Mishnah. The reading the Mishnah was his way to induce the Magid to speak to him. Since the Magid is the Mishnah, so he engages in in repetition in order to come to that. It seems to me that when I assess this idea of the Magid, and I'm not like psychologist, I'm really not a scholar of Yosef Karo, but it seems to me it's the kind of thing that he would invite through a combination of sleep deprivation and the repetition of Mishnayot. And he would get into sort of the kind of state where you might say his conscience began to speak to him, or the Magid would speak to him in a particular zone of consciousness. And he would say, "How did I not get up?" So he would repeat the Mishnayot over and over. Kol dodi dofek, the voice of my beloved knocks. B'toch pi minagen me'elav yitchil va'amar Hashem imach, and the Magid would say, "God is with you. B'chol asher telech, in all that you go. V'chol asher asita v'asher ta'aseh Hashem matzliach b'yadcha. All that you do, God will make you successful. Rak, but ki tidapek v'yirati, you have to cleave to me. And for what you've done, you let yourself fall asleep and you gave an opening to the devil, and the serpent of the evil inclination in your sleep. You slept until the day woke up. Shita is an Aramaic for 6. Shita Sidre Mishnah Sha'ata Yodea Al Peh. You know them by heart. Hasigufim Sha'asita B'yamim Shekadmu V'gam Ata Machzik Bahem Hiskimu B'yeshiva Shel Mala Sha'achzor. Because of your very intense learning, the heavenly court said, I should come back to you. L'daber imach, to speak with you, k'rishona, as before. V'shlo as avchavlan, as I shouldn't abandon you, I shouldn't forsake you. V'chein asiti, and so I did. Kasher ata ro'eh, as you see, b'chol zot shani medaber itach, kasher yedaber ish arehu, like one speaks with another. You should know, by the way, we have evidence from Rabbi Shlomo Alkabetz and others. They heard the Magid speak to Rabbi Yosef Karo. Now, it's possible that they meant that they saw the Magid possessed Rabbi Yosef Karo and it sort of articulated in his voice. We're not entirely clear what happened, but certainly there are others who give testimony that they saw this Magid speak through him. You should know that in many generations, no one has come to your level. No one has achieved your learning. You must study Torah all day, yomam v'layla, day and night, bli hafsek, without respite, without break. V'lo taher b'shum divrei, and you should not fantasize in anything else in this world except for Torah and Mishnayot. right? You can see how this Magid for the Rabbi Yosef Karo is his conscience, right? The moment you let your mind relax, the moment you take a break, the moment you think about, you know, how good the fresh baked bread is, right? You are off mission. You've got to stay laser focused. V'acher zeh yashanti k'mo chatzi sha'ah. So he says, I slept another half an hour after the Magid. V'ikatzti mitzta'er b'imri eich nifsok adibor b'sibat shinati. How can I let the Magid stop talking to me? Because the Magid is the Shechina. How can you let God's voice stop talking to you because you need to sleep? Right? And so he goes again and reads Mishnayot again. Um, and you get the picture, right? There's an intensity, a drive that is given to him by the Magid that um, that has him fully focused on his study. Just this slide was here to just show you that Shlomo Malka was also in Thessaloniki, and from the yeshiva Rabbi Yosef Teitschtak, and um, and that's possibly where they met, and certainly where he got the Magid. Now, there's this another piece of the Magid which is extremely important. The Magid is going to tell Rabbi Yosef Karo to write this very important work. And this very important work is the Beit Yosef. And we're going to learn about what makes this a unique work. But here, since I'm talking about the Magid, I want you to understand how the Magid is pushing him. I will cause you to finish your entire compilation without any mistake. That's a point that is repeated several times in different places, that it has to be perfect. You cannot allow there to be a mistake in it. And Rabbi Yosef Karo writes the Beit Yosef, which we'll talk about again. He writes this book within about a 10-year period, but he spends maybe another 20 years editing it, making sure it's perfect, to publish it and spread it to all the borders of my people Israel. I will raise you up as a leader of my people Israel, and your yeshiva will be greater than that of Yitzchak Abuav, and your Sanhedrin will be like the one of the chamber of the hewn stone. The chamber of the hewn stone, we should recall, the Lishkat HaGazit. The Lishkat HaGazit was the home of the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem that sat at the temple. When the Sanhedrin leaves the chamber of hewn stone, their authority diminishes remarkably. In the Rambam, there are all these different things. Most importantly, there's a special halacha of Zakein Mamre, the rebellious elder, that the rebellious elder can only be declared, someone can only be declared a rebellious elder if that individual disagrees with the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem. Because there, in the Lishkat HaGazit, they are sort of infallible, but not anywhere else. And so here the Magid is telling him, look, I'm going to make you something special. And I will say that in many ways, this is an exceedingly accurate historical prediction, right? It's written in 1540 maybe. I can't give you an exact date, but thereabouts, right? And I can tell you that in 1940 and in 2040, this statement is true, that the Rabbi Yosef Karo is maybe more important than any rabbi that has lived in the last 500 years. I think there's a strong argument to say he's more important than Rambam. But maybe we'll get there in a few minutes. They will say he is one who is head of the great yeshiva of the land of Israel, the great posek of Israel, Reish Giluta. Reish Giluta means that you're the head, the political head of the Jewish community. The Reish Giluta was a Babylonian term for a head of a yeshiva or head of the Jewish community that had tremendous authority. He was fourth in line to the Babylonian monarch. The great composer, and here composer is not like Mozart, but it's a composer of the mechaber of this book of the Beit Yosef, known as Karo, the King of Kings wishes to honor you. That last term, the King of Kings wants to honor you, right? It is Demelech Machem Lachem Chafetz Bikaro. That's a direct allusion to the story of Haman and Mordechai, right? Because remember, Mordechai goes into the king wants to know what has been done to honor Mordechai for saving his life, and his servants say nothing's been done. He says, "Oh," And then Haman is coming in and he says, Haman, what should we do to the person the king wishes to honor? Hamelech chafetz bikaro, the king wishes to honor. So this is not the king, but the
Okay.
king of kings, right? Who does God want to honor? And that is um, the term that the Magid is using to say, look, you get this right, God will honor you beyond compare.
Rabbi,
Now,
can I ask you a question, please?
yes, you may.
This text that we're reading from, is this text written by the Maggid himself?
No, it's written by Yosef Karo, right? Yosef Karo's diary of the communications of the Maggid to him. So when he wakes up, or when after a trance, and the Maggid says X, Y, Z, so Rabbi Yosef Karo writes down in his diary, this is what the Maggid said to me today.
I'm sorry, I must have lost something. Do we think that the Maggid is a real person or just his conscience?
No one thinks the Maggid is a real person,
I see,
right?
okay.
No one thinks the Maggid is a real person. The Maggid, the concept of Maggid speaking to people is something that appears basically it's a 16th century phenomenon. It's Shlomo Mocho, it's Yosef Karo, maybe Eliyahu Hanavi teaching the Ari. These are the now. It's a very difficult concept because we've assumed that prophecy ended at the Second Temple period. So prophecy ended the Second Temple period. What are these guys getting? Right? Is it prophecy? It's not really prophecy. Um, there is perhaps a certain kind of look. You know, I don't know how to explain it, quite frankly. I my own inclination is to see this as a kind of a psychological phenomenon, but um, but it is a look. You and I fall asleep, and I have dreams about unfinished homework, right? I don't know about yours, but I'll just, mine that I'm willing to share, right? I'm sitting an exam, don't know how to finish the exam. That's my dreams. But Yosef Karo's dreams are about the Maggid who's telling him not um, to miss a second of learning Torah, right? The Maggid is adjuring him for falling asleep instead of staying awake and engaging in study, right? I sleep in late. I said, oh, my body needed it. It's good I slept. That's not how he was built, right? He obviously was a very, very, this was a driving force. I'll add to that, Rabbi Rabbi Yosef Karo was someone who was looking for redemption. This is the Magid. He knew Shlomo Mocha was his hero. So Shlomo Mocha is he wants to die a martyr's death like Shlomo Mocha to save Am Yisrael. Now it's clear that his skill set was maybe not wielding a sword and maybe not approaching kings. His skill set was Torah study, and so his entire life is going to be dedicated to this. We'll see a couple of dimensions of what makes him very unique. But what I do want to take us to in the is and I heard this from a lecture by a professor of law at Tel Aviv University, Professor Aryeh Edrei, and his analysis of this sort of scenario was halacha was desperate for redemption, and redemption was desperate for halacha. Remember that the Ari is trying to create a model of redemption for the Jewish people that is a spiritual model that let's just say our job is to liberate the sparks. Maybe our souls are the spark um, to to fix the calamities of creation. For Rabbi Yosef Karo, the people of Israel, um, the halacha was in trouble. And so that's the meaning of halacha was desperate for redemption. And on the other hand, redemption was desperate for halacha. Their assumption was that the expulsion of the Jews from Spain, the troubles that they went through, could only be Chevle Mashiach, the birth pangs of the Messiah. And so, in many ways, like the somehow in the deep recesses of our conscience, the suffering of the Holocaust is what paved the way for the state of Israel, and that our sense of optimism about Israel is in certain ways the inversion of the darkness of the Holocaust. Now, I'm not saying everybody believes that in a rational basis. If I went to this Holocaust survivor or this second generation person and I said those words, they might not agree with them cognitively. But I do think that as a people in general, there is a certain um, exuberance about Israel, which is the inversion of the darkness of the Holocaust. And I think that the same idea happened here, and perhaps in a more spiritual way. Some of the people who turn the light of Israel into the dark, they go from the darkness of the Holocaust to the light of Israel, could be about human rights in Israel. It could be about socialist utopia in Israel. It could be, Brenner and Berdichevsky were not working on religious terms, right? Bialik thought it was about, being a Jew who could defend yourself, and not being passive like at the Khmelnytskyi, not the Kishinev pogrom. So, they're not entirely the same, but in this time period, all of these redemptive concepts were concepts that were taking place in people's on a religious dimension. And Rabbi Yosef Karo took this in a halachic in a halachic trajectory. So this is the Beit Yosef. This is the first printing of the Beit Yosef. It's actually at the first volume. The first volume was Orach Chaim, with the laws of daily life, blessings, how you do benching, the laws of Passover, Shabbos, Torah reading, etc. This one happens to be Choshen Mishpat, which is the civil code. Uh, and here's from the introduction to this book, the Beit Yosef. And maybe just a moment about explaining what the Beit Yosef is. The Beit Yosef will do is it will take a halachic issue, and the Rabbi Yosef Karo chooses to do it to make his commentary on a work that was already 200 years old by the time he begins to write. It was written by Rabbi Yaakov Baal HaTurim, who is the son of Rabbeinu Asher ben Yechiel. Asher ben Yechiel flees from Germany after the Rindfleisch massacres, and his friend Rabbi Shimon ben Aderet installs him as the chief rabbi of Toledo. His son, Rabbi Yaakov Baal HaTurim, was going to represent the integration of all the great learning of Ashkenaz, which really sunsets after that Rindfleisch massacre. It moves to Poland, so it's not, you no longer have the great rabbis of France and Germany. That entire lectural tradition had moved to Poland. And so that Franco-Germanic stream comes into Toledo. It gets merged together in this code, which is this code of Rabbi Yaakov Baal HaTurim. It's already 200 years old by the time Rabbi Yosef Karo starts to write on it. And what he will do is, let's just say we're talking about the laws of koshering vessels on Passover. And so let's just say he's dealing with, how do you make an oven kosher? Well, he'll start with he'll give you the source material of the Talmud. Maybe the Torah will have already done that, and then he will then tell you this is what the Rashi says. This is what the Tosot say. This is what the Rif says. This is what the Rambam says. He'll go through the Sephardic, Ashkenazic. Then he'll go through even later ones. If there are novelties that each one adds to the discussion of this point, it could be that some people say, well, you need to you can only make it kosher if it wasn't really used for chametz. It's just a little bit of chametz spilled on it. Others say no, even if it was used regularly for chametz, you can kosher it. And he'll go through the back and forth and how each one reads the Talmud and how each one might have a different kinds of logic that they apply to each situation. He's somewhat of an encyclopedia. He's an intellectual history and an encyclopedia of all the rabbinic discussion on a particular legal topic. And so this is what he writes. The quote here, by the way, is from Isaiah, and the wisdom of its wise shall fail. So that's sort of where he sees is that the wisdom of the wise is failing, and he's coming to rescue. He's coming to redeem the halacha. Baruch Hashem Elohei Yisrael asher bara olamav l'tachlit adam. Blessed is God, the God of Israel, who created his world for the purpose of man. V'yikar chol lanu hayamim v'horaknu mikli el kli. The days have stretched long, meaning it's been a lot of years since the golden age of Spain, since the great yeshivot, right? And we have been thrown from vessel to vessel in the diaspora. Halachnu v'kama tzarot tzurot tuchufot v'tzarot zula zu banu aleinu. How many horrible things have happened to us along the way? Ad ki nitkayem banu bavanotenu v'avda chachmat chachamav, right? And the wisdom of its wise has failed. Right? Va'azalta yada Torah lomdeha ki lo na'asita Torah kishtei Torot or ketorot ein mispar. We're at a problem now. We're not at 2 Torahs. We're at numerous Torahs. Everybody has a different prayer book. Everybody's got this one eats kitniot. This one doesn't eat kitniot. This one writes 5 menorahs. This one writes 1 menorah. Right? We have all sorts of different things. There's just not one single law in Israel, and his job is now going to be to repair the fact that that Jewish law has become many Jewish laws, right? If you I once was at the Kotel. I think I've told the story before, but it's worth telling again because this is what he's talking about. I was once at the Kotel, and there was a German tourist there, and he says to me, "What are the 2 religions here? The one with the knit circles on their head, and the other one's wearing black hats." This is the point where hopefully, since you're on mute, you're laughing. But the point is, yeah, it looks like 2 different Torahs, 2 different religions. And chas v'sholom, right? That's not what it's meant to be. And so this is what Rabbi Yosef Karo is worried about. He is trying to unify the entire Jewish world. And he's trying to do it with a book. And so here he's going to tell us, yes.
Quick question, if you don't mind. Can you just explain the structure of this Beit Yosef? The text in the middle of each page. What is that, and what's surrounding that?
Okay, the text in the middle of the page is the Tur. And so the Tur. Here, I'm gonna.
The Tur was one of the rabbis whose opinions he held to be the most valid, or.
No. Okay. The Tur, again, is the son of the Rush, right? The rabbi who fled the Rindfleisch massacres. That's Rabbeinu Asher ben Yechiel. The Tur is Rabbi Yaakov ben Asher, right? And you should know, anybody who knows Rabbi Ben Arosh, or anybody named Ben Arosh, they all come from this family. Ben Harosh, son of the Rosh. Rosh stands for Asher ben Yechiel. And so I'm just going to try and give you a taste of what happens in the Tur. Okay, so he's going to say, the Tur is going to say, Birkat HaMazon can be, the grace after meals can be said in any language, right? Because it says, V'achalta b'sabat u've'rachta. You shall eat and be satisfied and bless. B'chol lashan ata mevarech. In any language you can bless. And so the Beit Yosef is going to tell us that he's going to tell us the tzarech sheyishama la'oznav, and you should be able to. It should be articulated such that you can hear it in your ears. That's again the Tur. Ma shemotzi b'tzvatav. Miu im lo hishmiya la'oznav yatza. But if you didn't make it, if you just sub-vocalized it, you didn't actually articulate it, you have fulfilled your obligation, right? So the Beit Yosef is going to say, okay, where do you find this? Because the Tur doesn't tell you. He doesn't give you footnotes. He says, okay, this comes in the chapter of Brachot, which is called Hayakora, That's the title of the chapter. And Amar Rav Yosef Machloket b'Kriyat Shema. Rav Yosef, and so he's going to cite the Talmud, but the Machloket is with Kriyat Shema. But in all other mitzvot, everybody else says that you fulfill if you didn't say it out loud, right? And then, um, um, I'm just trying to quickly sum it. Um, so he's going to quote the Rabbeinu Yonah, who says Hada Amrin Belibo, that it should be in his heart. Lo b'machshava bilvad ka'amar. So Rabbeinu Yonah is going to tell us that it can't be just thinking. You actually have to do more than that. And so thinking is not like speaking. And so if you're going to bless, you're going to have to move your lips. And then he's going to tell us that the Rambam says that um, he's going to tell us the Rambam's position. He goes through, he catalogs everybody. Ashkenazic, Sephardic, we're going to see that's actually an important point. But what he's going to do is walk you through the intellectual history. This is what everybody in different generations has said on this. Anna, you raised your hand.
Yes. Well, can we not say that it was really different minhagim rather than only one hard law or hard halacha? So in other words, all the minhagim of all the diaspora of the Jews would be correct, and he's compiling all here as a proof of that. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it if they were incorrect.
No. Some of these things are minhagim, agreed. Some of them are hard and fast laws
that are different from one kehillah to another.
Sure.
Okay, so there must be a reason. It's all anchored in the Torah, after all.
Okay, so look, let's just say you have two different reads of the Talmud, right? Two different, ways of the Rambam and the Tosfot read the Talmud of a certain section differently, or maybe there are two different places in the Talmud where this is discussed, and you have to decide which one's authoritative. You have to decide what are the differences between the cases, and Maimonides and the Tosfot differ on that, right? That's what he's trying to reconcile.
So he's actually finding the reconciliation. He solves the issue.
Here, Annie, I'll give you a famous one where he comes out. We're going to save the substance of this for next week, but one of the areas where he was, I believe, stringent was, let's just say you sell your farm to a non-Jew during the Shemitah year, right? The Beit Yosef says it doesn't remove the obligations of the Shemitah year, of the sabbatical year, right? Now, there are other positions that say it does, right? That's not just a minhag, that's a real legal concept, right?
Yes, there's a difference of opinion here, yes.
Right, so the question is, those are real difference of opinion. Those happen in legal matter. I'll give you another one where we could articulate a difference of opinion. Well, there are endless numbers of them.
Yes,
quite frankly.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, and these never come to mind, and maybe I should have brought you some more examples of this. This is bread and butter sort of rabbinics. Just trying to.
Well, that's what the Talmud does anyway. It gives all the different opinions, the minor,
No. So, okay, the Talmud, what the Talmud will do is the Talmud will give you Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, right? And it'll give you interpretations of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Meir. But then you have interpretations on that, which are going to be the Rishonim, the people who are the medieval commentators. Here's a famous one. Let's just say I cooked an egg in a milchik pan, and then I took that egg and I used it as stuffing for my chicken. Right? Now, according to the Beit Yosef, that's well, actually, back it up a second. I cooked an egg in a milchik pan, and now I say Gevalt. I have no more eggs, but I was planning to make stuffing. So you ask the Beit Yosef. The Beit Yosef is going to say his conclusion was that that's fine because the Talmud says a fish from a milk pot that went onto a meat dish is going to be okay. And there's a debate about what context that was. Was that, are you allowed to do that on purpose? Or is it only if it's an accident?
Where is the fish here? It's an
That's
egg.
the original case of the Talmud.
Oh,
The original case of the Talmud is the fish,
oh,
is the fish, the fish that goes from a milk pot onto a meat plate.
Uh-huh.
The Beit Yosef is going to say, well, that refers to a case which is you had made the fish and then you only had one clean plate, or you only had one plate and it was a meat plate, so you put the fish on the meat plate, no problem. The alternate opinion is no, that only happened accidentally, but you're not allowed to do that on purpose. So that gets translated into his discussion as, okay, if I'm using an egg for stuffing and I made it in a milk pot, am I allowed to put it into the chicken? Is it only kosher if I accidentally put it into the chicken?
Mm-hmm.
Right? These are some of those issues, right?
I see, but there are other remedies. There's batel b'shishim, and the other things.
If this were a class on kashrut, we could do a whole.
No,
we could go down the rabbit hole of all the different remedies, but that's not what we need to establish for our purposes right now. Is that there were significant differences in law, in the way in which various things were practiced, right? What was kosher, what was not kosher, right? And so these created significant problems, or at least in his mind they did. And he said, "Kol echad mechaber sefer latzmo v'kofel ma shekfar katav v'chiber mishekadmu, o kotav adin behefach ma shekatvu chavero."
Yeah, exactly.
Each person writes his own book, forgets what the person before him wrote, and right, nobody deals with previous stuff, right? And people bring things without citations, right? All these problems. Al Kain, therefore, ani adal, I, this poor creature, this lowly creature, necessary humility, self-deprecation. Yosef ben Moreno Harav Ephraim ben Moreno Harav Yosef Karo. Karo, by the way, means yakar in Ladino.
Yakar.
Right?
Yes.
Kaneti la Hashem tzvakot. I was jealous for God. V'ne'arti chatzani l'sakel b'mesila v'iskamti. And I decided, l'chaber sefer kolel kol adinim anohagim. It's going to have all of the practiced laws. Biur, with explanation. Sharashehem, their origin. I'm going to tell you where it comes from in the Talmud. Umotza'ehem, and where they go out to. Me'agamara, im kol chilukei svarot haposkim ish lo ne'edar. All of the different opinions of the rabbis over time, ish lo ne'edar. I'm not leaving anyone out. V'lo ra'iti lasot sefer zeh chibor bifnei atzmo. I won't do this as a book all by itself. Right? Kedei shelo etzarech lichvov v'chtov divrei mi shekadamni. Right? I don't need to completely do this. He's going to write this as a compilation around another book. That book was the Torah. I put it with one of the famous compilations. He chooses, by the way, not to do the Rambam. You'll see. He says, Rambam, I decided maybe I would do the Rambam, right? Because he's the most famous of all the decisors. But I retreated from that position because Rambam only brings one opinion, his own.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed to write many opinions and their reasoning. And therefore, I decided to put it around the Arbaturim, the four pillars of Rabbeinu Yaakov ben Harosh, Zichrono Livracha. Right? Because he starts the work for me. He gets most of the poskim. The Beit Yosef, by the way, was never printed without the Torah. Always printed with the Torah. So that's another sort of feather in his cap. Now, this is the one other thing. He tells you all of these different poskim that he's going to choose. The Tosfot, the Ran, the Rif, the Rush, Mordechai, German, Rambam, right? All of these. The Tashbates, who is an Algerian posek. the Sefer Iter, a German posek, Nimuke Yosef, Castilian, Smak, German, right? So you're going to have all of the Rashba is a Castilian, right? He gives you all of these rabbis, and then he also tells you, I'm also including the Zohar. So that's first of all something we've never seen before. It includes the Zohar, but that's not a hugely impactful source in his writing. There is a scholar named Rabbi Dr. Yisrael Tashma who wrote a book about he wrote an article rather about the inclusion of the Ashkenazic sources as extremely important because Beit Yosef wanted to be the book for all Israel, and he could not the way he would decide how to distill things is he would take the best 2 out of 3 of Rambam, Rif, Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi of Fez, and Rush, Rabbeinu Asher ben Yechiel of Toledo. Now, that's really, I'm going to say 2.5 Sfardim against half an Ashkenazi. Right? The Rush is Ashkenazic, but really the latter half of his life is Sephardic. So it's really 2.5 Sfardim against an Ashkenaz. So really it's going to be a Sephardic book. But in order to balance this and to make the Beit Yosef a book for all Israel, he's going to go out of his way to do this. The thing that is remarkable is that Rav Yosef Karo had wives died on him, children died on him. His father died when he was 6 or 7. You saw where he went around the world. Where did he get all these books? Where did he have time to do this? What he did under the circumstances he did it was remarkable.
Yes. Wow.
So,
Mhm.
so here, this is where you see the redemption of the law. After I go through the whole research project for every subject, I will decide amongst these positions. We Jews need one Torah. We need to put everything under a single flag. We need to be a unified people. And so the law was going to be his idea to redeem that.
So he decided halacha kebet Yosef.
But I think it's a little bit more delicate than that. Yes, right?
Yeah. Well, he was a genius man, so I have no problem with him.
There's no question he was a genius. And look, the person who, I always say this, the person who writes the code, the final code of Jewish law, you don't want him to be the guy who's got a big ego. You want him to be the guy who does it because he feels he's forced to. What he sees is this calamity happening, and part of the calamity requires a contraction of the law, a sort of distillation.
Yes.
And this, without question, the Shulchan Aruch is not only a book; it is now a term in modern Hebrew to refer to, the standardized normative law in any area. You could say, this is the Shulchan Aruch of mechanical engineering, right? Could be a phrase you hear in some places. The extent to which all halachic discussion, it may start in the Talmud, but you cannot really advance without referencing the Shulchan Aruch. It becomes the most important book without question. In Rav Yosef Karo's terms, though, the Shulchan Aruch was just this little this pneumatic device that you use to review what you've done in the Beit Yosef. But the Beit Yosef is the real purpose, and it collects all of the opinions, which was novel in his day, and obviously an enormous body of work, a remarkable achievement in his day. Now, just sort of an interesting side piece on this. This is a story. It's sourced here to Rabbi Shlomo Shlomiel, but it appears in other sources as well. And it says that every time that Yosef Karo would review his Mishnayot by heart, this Magid would speak to him. That we saw already. Um, but it was like he wasn't important. Lefi shechachmato shel ha'ari, it was nothing compared to the Ari. V'atzma yashav lifnei chachmato shel Ari, he stood in front of the Ari, and he learned from him the secrets of the Torah. But the Ari didn't want to teach him. V'amar shenishmat nishamto eina mesugelet lekabel chochma yoter. His neshama could not take on new wisdom. Ella al pi derech shel Ramak, he could only do it through Rabbi Moshe Cordovero. V'siman l'davar shebechol pam sheyesh ma'arik, that's Marenu Harav Rav Yosef Karo. Lefanav, when Rav Yosef Karo stopped, Techav kishitchil galot so ditchil Marenu Harav Yosef Karo lishan v'lim namnem. He would fall asleep when the Ari would teach, right? Until he himself realized that he was not built for the Ari's Torah. And so here we discover that the Ari is that the Rav Yosef Karo and the Ari are two different branches, and they're both going to advance the world of redemption in two different but necessarily twin domains. That the Ari is, as we saw last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago, that the Ari has their tshuvot that he asks of Rav Yosef Karo. He's anchored to Rav Yosef Karo's halachic guidance. And Rav Yosef Karo appreciates the greatness of the Ari's mystical abilities, but each one of them is advancing redemption differently. Now, where are we going next week? Where we go next week is the sort of, it was important, I think, this week to sort of establish the halachic spirit of Tzvat. But next week, we're going to see how that halachic impetus, that desire to bring all Israel under a single banner of Torah, is going to bring about an attempt to revive the Sanhedrin. We're going to see the attempt to unify the Jewish world in political action against anti-Semitism by Dana Garcia Mendez Nasi. And we're going to see how the conversos manifest in this question in a very real way. It will be, I think, a very fascinating moment to be able to see the end of this sort of halachic period of Tzvat. Interestingly, after the 1600s, Tzvat did not really produce any remarkable halachists. But during the time of Rabbi Yaakov Beirav, there were numerous. The Mabit, we'll talk about him more next week. Rabbi Yosef of Trani, and Rabbi Yaakov Beirav, of course, and of course Rabbi Yosef Karo. There was not another. It's very hard to find another place and time of similar stature.